Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back into the SFS channel. My name's Gavin, and today we're going to be diving into some early Week 2 waiver wire targets here with just Monday Night Football left to go here in Week 1. So following Sunday, we've got all the information we need pretty much here in a list of players. I've got 10 of them that I think could be valuable acquisitions to our team here in the coming weeks. So without further ado, if you're new around here, drop down and subscribe to the channel and turn that bell on so you're never late for an episode, and give today's video a like. Without further ado, let's hit that intro and get straight into our players. Alrighty, the first and maybe most important player to go out there and add this week is at the running back position. The thinnest in fantasy football, one of the hardest positions to find adequate players to start in our lineups. This, of course, is Mark Ingram, and something that I didn't quite expect was for him to be the leader in this backfield. I thought heading into Week 1, he kind of seemed like the clear number 3 option here, and I figured that Philip Lindsay and David Johnson, who were both active and involved in that game, I just expected them to precede him on the depth chart and overall be the more utilized players. But that wasn't the case. Mark Ingram was heavily utilized in Week 1. He had 26 carries for 85 yards and a touchdown in the opener against Jacksonville, and that outtouched every other combined Houston Texan on the ground. They only had 15 total touches outside of Mark Ingram's workload. So that was something very surprising to see, but very encouraging for his value going forward here. I think that this Houston Texans offense is going to struggle, and while they did blow the Jags out of the water a bit more than was expected, and they did look like a better football team than I think a lot of us anticipated, I think we can also chalk that up to a lot of their starters played in the preseason. They weren't rusty and just shaking off dust here in Week 1, and they were ready to go. But nonetheless, if Mark Ingram continues to see this level of workload, he should be a valuable player. And for a guy who's only rostered in 11% of ESPN leagues, a lot of you out there should be able to go out and find him. Before I get into my next waiver wire pickup for Week 2, I want to talk to you all about my favorite way to increase my profitability in odds when I bet on sports this season. ODDSJAM is a website that compares sports betting odds from over 30 top sports books and helps you find the best value regardless of which side of the line you're betting on. By heading over to football on the drop-down menu section, I can check out the most relevant up-and-coming NFL games and all of the different modes that ODDSJAM has for me to compare the different odds and lines out there on the sports betting market. For example, if I was to head over to the money line section here, I can check out which sports books give me the best odds and best return, the best bang for my buck if I were to bet on the Ravens here. So, for example, BetMGM at -189 gives me the best opportunity to go out and get a quality return on the money I spend on that game. And on the flip side, if you want to bet the Raiders tonight, FanDuel's got you covered with the best value at +180 odds to, again, get that best return on the money you're putting into these games. To sign up for your free ODDSJAM account, you can do so by clicking the link to their website, which is the top link posted in the description of today's video. In addition, I have also posted a link to their Twitter account so you can find out more information about how ODDSJAM can help you get the best bang for your buck this NFL season. One more time, go check out ODDSJAM. It is a great platform to go and get great returns on your sports bets this season and to put some money in your pocket. But jumping right back into things here, Elijah Mitchell is the next name up on the waiver wire pickups list. Now, this is a member of the 49ers backfield, and he's a rookie, but probably not the rookie we're expecting to see break out this week. Trey Sermon, for whatever reason, was a healthy scratch and did not suit up for the game. And guess what? As expected, Raheem Mostert missed a large chunk of that game because he figured out and found a way to get injured. He's unfortunately and very frustratingly been one of the most injury-prone running backs in the league the past few seasons, despite how effective he's been when he's actually out there. But Elijah Mitchell stepped up to the plate and he took off this past weekend against the Detroit Lions. Mitchell had 19 carries for 104 yards and a touchdown, and right now he's only rostered in 0.1% of ESPN Fantasy League. So in deeper leagues out there, depending on the news from Trey Sermon this week, if we figure out why he was a scratch, if he's going to suit up for this week's game, Mitchell could potentially find a way to work himself into this offense. It is a crowded backfield. It's a committee-style system. There's a lot of different guys who are going to touch the football and find ways to be utilized. But for now, Mitchell appears to be a relevant name here and a player I can't overlook in Week 2. And then the last running back I'm going to talk about today, Kenneth Gainwell, the rookie running back for the Philadelphia Eagles. More of an offensive weapon, but the relevancy here is the fact that Boston Scott was not seen on the field, had 0 touches in week 1. Kenneth Gainwell looks like he's the clear number 2 option behind Miles Sanders, who also posted a very strong performance against Atlanta. But Gainwell had 10 total touches, 43 yards, and a touchdown. Nothing spectacular, but for a very dynamic player who also adds value as a pass catcher out of the slot and is only owned in 3.5% of ESPN fantasy leagues, this is another player that I think has immense value to us on the waiver wire this week in those deeper league formats. Here we go, now into quarterbacks. Jameis Winston carved up my Packers this week, 5 passing touchdowns, only 148 passing yards. Most of that was because of the fact that they started with short fields and were already near scoring territory. Matt LaFleur had that offense going for it, literally inside the 30-yard line at times before even crossing midfield. It was a disastrous week. The Packers looked flat on offense. Their defense looked gassed. They were just playing terrible all-around football. Jameis carved him up. He picked him apart. He looked very good. He did throw an interception, but it was called back because of a roughing the passer penalty call. Nonetheless, Jameis impressed me. He's by far one of the best high upside quarterback plays out there right now. I think Kirk Cousins is another guy who we're going to talk about here in just a second that has maybe a little bit more of a consistent floor. But Jameis, for what we've seen so far, should be a viable fantasy quarterback for us. And if you can keep that interception total down, we're looking at a player who could have a revitalized career and a very, very healthy season in the statistical department for Sean Payton and that offense. Jared Goff here. So before we talk about Kirk Cousins, Goff had himself a very good game as well against, at least in terms of a raw fantasy statistical output perspective, against the 49ers. He did throw a pick 6. He is Jared Goff. This is the Detroit Lions offense, but they stormed back late in this football game after they were getting blown out of the water and were down by like 3 touchdowns. They came back and made this a game. They lost the game by an 8-point margin. But he was still out there getting things done, whether it was TJ Hawkinson, DeAndre Swift out of the backfield. He made some other plays to some wide receivers down the list on the depth chart. But Jared Goff was getting it done at the end of the day. This isn't a player who adds much value in the rushing department. This isn't a player who I would say has an incredibly high ceiling on a week-to-week basis. But overall, the numbers and the trends that we saw were more encouraging than they were not. So if you're needy for a quarterback, maybe you've got Fitzmagic for some reason as a dependent starter for you. He's out with the hip injury. We'll see what that looks like. This is an option, especially in deep leagues. Jared Goff could come out here and be a legitimate handcuff quarterback, or he could be some type of a very extreme streaming option. That sounds kind of weird to say, but there is a situation where he could come in here in matchups where you expect the Lions, who are kind of a poor football team, they're going to have to keep passing the ball late, and this is going to have to be a high-volume passing offense just because they're trying to stay relevant and just because of the fact that they're probably going to be playing catch-up a lot. That's going to increase the offensive passing numbers there in Detroit. And then I talked about him already a little bit. Kirk Cousins here had a very strong quality start against the Cincinnati Bengals. Threw a few touchdown passes, had a nice amount of yardage. Again, not a player that's going to add much dynamic ability as a rushing threat, but this is just a very quality offense. You've got Dalvin Cook, who sets up a really nice play-action pass game. You've got yourself 2 really nice wide receivers in Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen that I think can help boost Kirk's weekly production and keep that floor very, very safe. For those of us out there who have a little bit more boom or bust quarterback play, Kirk Cousins is a great option to stash away on the bench, and for a guy that's only owned in 24% of leagues, he can definitely be found out there for a lot of different units. Into the wide receivers now, Zach Pascal for the Indianapolis Colts. He's the guy that stepped up this week. It wasn't Michael Pittman. It wasn't anyone else there. It was Zach Pascal in the passing game. Honestly, Jonathan Taylor was this team's best offensive player outside of the quarterback position with Carson Wentz. He led this team in receiving for a large part of this game. But Zach Pascal has been a touchdown magnet the last 2 years with Phillip Rivers and now with Carson Wentz. Zach Pascal had a very impressive touchdown reception against the Seahawks in Week 1. If he keeps being utilized in that area of the field, there's no reason not to stash him on your bench. He's probably not a frequent starting option, but for a team that's in very dire need of a number 1 scoring threat at that position, Zach Pascal could just be the guy that steps up and takes grasp and reign of that number 1 offensive passing number and workload. I don't think the ceiling's sky high here, but there's definitely flex value to be had with Pascal, and again, that red zone usage. Christian Kirk, this is a player I really like and was surprised that his ADP was so bottomed out and low this offseason. But man, he looks like the clear number 2 in Arizona. Now, they were passing the ball to A.J. Green and Rondale Moore, who would be the number 3 and 4 options. And technically, the depth chart tells you that A.J. Green is the number 2 option. But Christian Kirk had himself a heck of a game. He looked very impressive. He was stretching the field. And outside of DeAndre Hopkins, I think he might just command the second most volume in the passing game here. Christian Kirk had caught 5 of his 5 targets for 70 yards and 2 reception touchdowns, and he's only owned in 3.6% of fantasy leagues. So another player with a really nice ceiling. You're talking about an air raid offensive system that chucks the ball all over the yard. They're not going to run the ball a ton of times. They are looking to air it out deep down the field, and Kyler Murray is one of the best deep passing quarterbacks in the NFL, and that's obviously Christian Kirk's strength as a wide receiver. So you give me a positive situation from his talent perspective and the output that his quarterback gives him the potential to produce. I think it's a really advantageous and beneficial situation to be in, and I think Christian Kirk should be definitely picked up by a lot more fantasy owners this week. Van Jefferson, following Sunday Night Football, he had himself a game against the Bears. Really impressive. Matt Stafford's first pass as a Los Angeles Ram goes 67 yards over the top to Van Jefferson, who a lot of people expected to be the number 4 option in this team, and maybe he's not going to see a crazy amount of volume because I think it's really easily accepted that Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp are the clear number 1 and 2 options in this offense. That's not changing, but that number 3 window is still open, and for an offense that's so dynamic, so efficient, so well coached, whether it is Deshaun Jackson or Van Jefferson, there is a role to be had here. And if he can carve out just enough targets in these good matchups with weaker secondaries, weaker back ends, Van can have himself some nice games and put together a string of performances that will be valuable enough to have him rostered by fantasy managers. And then Cedrick Wilson here, the last player on the list. This one comes down to injury. This is our first case scenario where we're looking at an injury to another player that has opened the door for someone else to step up and take over their offensive workload and role. Now, Cedrick Wilson or any team's 4th-string receiver wouldn't normally be someone I push up into the spotlight here for a fantasy-relevant episode. But since I've seen Cedrick Wilson produce for the Dallas Cowboys offense with Dak Prescott on the field early on last season, it gives me faith, confidence, comfortability that he can step up and do the same this year. He did catch some passes against Tampa Bay on opening Thursday night, and with Michael Gallup out 3 to 5 weeks with his lower body injury, Cedrick Wilson's going to have his chance to get himself connected even more with Dak Prescott, carve out a role for himself in this offense, and again, like a Van Jefferson, we know he is clearly below a CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper in the offensive totem pole for how those targets are going to be distributed, but the passing volume is still high enough in that Cowboys offense that he'll get looks, he'll have opportunities to score plays, and if you're looking for a streaming flex option in those easier matchups, Cedrick Wilson's absolutely somebody who has the potential in 12, 14, 16-man leagues to find himself stashed away on a bench roster. Alrighty, those were 10 waiver wire pickup options for week 2 of fantasy football. If you have any questions about your fantasy leagues, if you want any advice, any help, any information on how to win your week's matchup, who to start, who to sit, trade advice, whatever it may be, we've got a ton of episodes coming out this week, but I'm also happy to get back to you in the comment section down below and respond to any questions you have for me. Additionally, linked in the description of every video is the free SFS community Discord, which is a server basically where all of my viewers are welcome to come join, talk NFL football, discuss information on Sundays, and just chat with each other, have a good time. That is accessible for you to join. Again, that's in the description of every video. SFS Gold, it's another opportunity that members and viewers here on the channel have to head over to my website, sizzlefantasy.com, and get some exclusive content. Every week, Eric and I are going to be posting positional rankings for a week's given matchup. We'll consider all things factored into situations and ultimately build that rankings list based off of how we think players are going to produce and output for us, on an individual week basis. There's a lot of stuff coming from us to you on the channel here this season. I can't wait to dive into all that stuff. But without further ado, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace out.